Hi there, my name is Emer, and today I'm going to go through the order form breakdown with you. If you don't have it with you right now, please have a copy of the catalogue and the standard order form with you. So the first thing about the order form, you'll start to fill in the patient information. There's a few things that we need here that are absolutely compulsory, and there's some things that are optional. Obviously, we need the patient's name, but we do also need the patient's weight and shoe size. If you don't provide that information, your order will be put on hold and will remain on hold until we get that information from you. The patient's weight will determine the shell thickness, and the patient's shoe size will determine the length of the top cover. There are loads of different shell thicknesses depending on the shell that you choose. We don't expect you to know all of them. Therefore, we ask you for the patient's weight, and then we can make sure it's within a guaranteed bracket for that patient. The patient's date of birth and footwear type isn't compulsory, but it is something that we recommend you provide us with. It gives us an opportunity to better help guide you with the choices that you're making to ensure a better fit. So that's for the footwear type. So the patient's date of birth will give us an idea of their activity levels. And also, if they're under 16, they're automatically enrolled into an outgrowth plan, and that's a discount program. The information on that is on the last page of the catalogue. The footwear type, like I was saying, will help us guide you to make sure that the device type is the right fit for the shoes that they're wearing. The better the fit, the better patient outcomes you will see. So when you're choosing your device type, the first thing is there's two main differences. You're either choosing an accommodative device or a functional device. This would be the accommodative device, nice and soft. It could be somebody for more complex pathologies, lesser fatty pads, very rigid foot, somebody you're just trying to make more comfortable, but they may not tolerate any correction. Then your more functional devices is something like your polypropylene, your carbon fiber, your 3D printed, your more rigid materials, and the patient does have some movement and can tolerate some correction. So then when it comes to choosing your device type, you'll see there in red, there's functional, dress, and sports. And there's a few main differences between those devices. The main thing is the grind. So in the catalogue, if you see grind, we're talking about the width of the device. Here at the heel counter, at the MLA and the distal shell edge. The dress is the narrowest, the functional is the mid, and then the sports device is the widest. In terms of heel cup, this is the shallowest, that's the dress. The functional is mid, and that's at about 12 mil, and that's at about 16 mil. That's the sports again. Just going back there, the dress is about 8 to 10 mil. That's the main differences between those three styles of devices. Then for your accommodative devices, there's this is the RA soft mold. Obviously, you can see that it's all filled underneath. It does take up more room. For any of your accommodative devices, the patient will need to wear sensible shoes. Chances are they are already because they're probably a little bit more complex. Then there's an array of children's devices and that sort of thing down here. And they're usually made out of polypropylene. But all of the device types are listed here, and it will show you the set of specs for each device type. So say, for instance, you come along, you put in your patient information, you tick a standard sports, that's what you're going to get. So it already has a set of specs allocated to it. So for this particular one, it's a neoprene top cover, which comes in 3 mil to toes, a semi-rigid polypropylene shell, a vinyl bottom cover, and an EVA extrinsic rear foot post. If you go to the catalogue, there's the description there for the standard sport. And the same rule applies for all of our device types. For the shell materials all have unique selling points. I'm just going to touch on some of them briefly. So polypropylene is a really good all-rounder. You can do a lot with it, high heel cups, postings, skives. It's probably not our thinnest or lightest material that we have, but it is very versatile. The 3D printed shell material may or may not be on the order form you have in front of you. It has a lot of the same properties as polypropylene in terms of functionality. Performance RX, that's a lighter material and more flexible than polypropylene. It's a polyhybrid material. It does come with some limitations, but if you're looking for something more flexible than polypropylene, then Performance RX is a good option. We have two types of carbon fiber, the very different functions. There's XT Sprint and TLT100. XT Sprint has a sagittal plane spring in it, but it doesn't rotate, so it keeps the ankle secure. The TLT100 is able to tolerate more weight. So if you have a heavier patient, TLT100 works quite well for it. Delrin is also a good material that can tolerate a lot of weight, and it's very robust. So then the next section is rigidity. All of our devices by default are semi-rigid. So it's not too flexible, not too rigid, it's somewhere in the middle. It's designed for that patient's weight. You can play around with that if you wish. One thing I would say, anything that you add to the plantar aspect of a device will increase rigidity because it reduces flex. Fill materials. So we're talking about filling under the MLA. So it's this kind of area here. And so some of the reasons that you would want to use that is for shock absorption. It does take up more room and it can increase rigidity. So that's just something to bear in mind. It's not good or bad. It's just something to bear in mind. Forefoot extension. That's when we're talking about a piece of material that starts here at the distal shell edge and goes either to sulcus or toes. Okay, it's not, it is a mid-layer, but it doesn't cover the shell. So you may use it when you're trying to reduce bulk or increase forefoot padding. You can see there that there's lots of different materials and thicknesses that you can use. So then your top cover selection, we have lots of different top covers, mid layers and bottom covers. So vinyl, leather, microsuede and carbon, they're all thin top covers. So leather and microsuede is obviously natural resources, can be more breathable and that kind of thing. If you maybe have a vegetarian, they wouldn't want something like that. We do try to ask the podiatrists, to use whatever they feel is best for the patient rather than just giving them whatever they think might be best. And there can be pros and cons to different materials. Some may break down quicker than others. But once it's patient specific and it's doing its job, then it's not a problem. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the different top covers. So neoprene then is this one that I spoke about already. It's the same as the wetsuit material. It just comes in one thickness and that's 3 mil. Plastizote. Plastizote is often used on some of your more complex pathologies, maybe like a diabetic tridensity. It is a material that can break down quicker. It acts as a protective barrier, so the foot doesn't. So if you use that material, you may need to get it refurbished more often. Puff is like EVA. It's very durable. It lasts a long time. It wears well. And it's really nice combined with a pour-on mid-layer. You can see that it is there for additional cushioning. The only time we'd say maybe don't use puff is because it's a little bit grippy and it can generate some heat. So if your patient complains of having hot or burning feet, maybe choose something else in that instance. But it is really good for sporting devices, and even if you wanted a dress device but small bulk, you could just do a 1.5 puff top cover on that because it wouldn't take up too much room. So then it says combine material with, that's what I spoke about earlier. You can combine any of the materials. That's a vinyl top cover. If you want a wipeable top cover, but add an extra layer of cushioning, you can pop pour-on underneath that. Your bottom cover selection, we will put bottom covers on all of the devices that go past a met length. And we will choose that based on the shell material and to see what's more durable to cut through. Sometimes it does cut through because the material is sharp. When it's a rigid material, it doesn't affect the functionality of the device. That's just there really to make it look like a better finished device and to protect anything that's in the forefoot or any mid layers. If you see a crack here, it will show over time, but it's fine. Within your posting section, so if you cast or however you decide to capture your foot and you've captured in subtalar neutral and you don't want us to interfere, or if your patient has a very rigid foot and you don't want any corrections on it, there's an option there to tick neutral as they sit. There's another box there that says lab evaluation. If you write notes on the order form front or back and you want us to consider them, then please do tick lab evaluation. Calcaneal vertical is where we just bring the calcaneal to vertical and balance the met heads to be on an even plane. And then your measurements from vertical is that vertical stance. And again, we'll put on the postings from there if it's bilateral 3-degree varus or something like that. The maximum amount of degrees that you can put in the rear foot or forefoot is 10 degrees. And as well as that, the postings in the initial manufacturing process, they will look intrinsic. This is then put on as a stabilizing post. So if you say, I want 8 degrees varus posting on the right device, and then you get the device back and you say, I can't see it. It's actually done in there, but you'll have an extrinsic rear foot post. It's not always visible. Task dressing is where we talk about tissue spread or how close contact the device is to the patient's anatomy. So if you think about that as a scale, minimum is the default. If you don't take anything, you'll get minimum. If you look at the skin side, skin is closer contact. It's going to be closer to the arch, a tighter heel cup, and an overall more controlling device. If you look the opposite end of the scale to max, you're really talking about a wider device, a lower arch, and it's where it's more away from the anatomy, so it's less controlling. So again, minimum, not too controlling, not very controlling. Then your shell modifications. Your shell modifications, there is a golden rule really that we advise. If you're unsure and you're choosing something that adds to the device, we say go for it, such as a rigid first extension or something like that. If you're taken away from the device, do proceed with caution. Once that piece of material is gone, we can't put it back. It would result in potentially a remake, depending on the severity of the request and how the patient is reacting to it. But if it's something you put on and then you look at them, see the patient at the review, we can always reduce a heel cup. We can always take away a rigid first extension or make a medial or lateral flange 50%. That's not a problem. If you take away the heel hole, we can't put it back. Then for your additions, all of your additions are made out of either pour-on, EVA, or cushion cork. So none of these things are going to result in a remake. You can play around with these things as much as you like. So say, for instance, you wanted a reverse Morton's extension and you wanted to, you want to see exactly what that looks like. If you look at the back of the catalog, there's like a directory for all of the shell modifications and the additions and extensions. So here you'll see it's made out of 3mm cushion cork. It's applied on the dorsal aspect and it supports 2 to 5. So it allows the first to drop. We would use it for a plantar flex first ray and we don't use it for hallux limitus rigidus. So in the same fashion, they're all explained at the back of the catalog. And like I say, you can play around with them as much as you need to, and you won't run into any remakes or anything like that. If there's ever anything that you're unsure of, you can put a question mark on it, or in the special instructions, you can write down here, please call to discuss, and we'll happily go through it with you. As well as that, if there's a top cover or a bottom cover, if there's anything that you're unsure of, you can always write down here, please phone to discuss, and we'll happily give you a call to make sure that you're okay with what you're receiving. We'll always have lots of materials. I suppose the main thing is keep the lines of communication open, and the more questions you ask, or if there's anything you need to know, we'll happily answer, and we'll get back to you very quickly. The team is very knowledgeable and very responsive. I hope that has helped, and happy ordering.